This is a paid advertisement. Attention metrics are part of the zeitgeist, and for good reason. The industry needs a better quality measure than viewability. According to the IAB, 90% of advertisers plan to use attention metrics this year, so there's a good chance they're on your radar. If you're part of this forward-thinking majority, it's time to familiarize yourself with the Adelaide's AU. Endorsed by Adweek as the attention economy's most widely recognized metric, AU is available in nearly every DSP, SSP, and ad network. Learn more at AdelaideMetrics.com. That's AdelaideMetrics.com. Welcome to the Marketecture podcast. I'm Ari Paparo. I'm joined by Eric Franchi. And our special guest today is Alan Wolk, the co-founder of TVREV, one of the leading publications about the TV business. And this is really going to be our TV episode, so I'm pretty excited to get into it. Alan, thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure, man. My pleasure. Glad to be here.
I usually do a quick promo. I'll just give a quick story here, which is I got texted by some fellow I didn't know, junior employee at LiveRamp, who got my phone number off of LinkedIn. For those of you who don't know, I put my phone number on LinkedIn. So he texted me he didn't think it was me. He thought it was a bot. Turned out it was me. And he talked about how much he loved the podcast. And I said, well, do you pay for Marketecture TV to get the good stuff? And he's like, oh, I don't know. And then 5 minutes later, he came through and paid. So I want to thank that subscriber. I won't name him to embarrass him, but also let you know that entry-level employees at ad tech companies, there's no better way to improve your career than spending the $40 or whatever it is a month and getting Marketecture TV as a subscription. All right. I'm done with my self promo. So, Alan, tell us, what is TVREV?
So TVREV is a multi-headed beast. TVREV is a website that creates articles, that we have articles, run articles about the television industry. Basically, it really focuses on that intersection between where streaming and advertising intersect. We have a newsletter that goes out 3 times a week. It hits about 60,000 people. At this point, that's 60. And I had looked at it the other day. I was like, wow, we got more subscribers. And we also do special reports on breaking topics. We have one that's coming out next month on local television and streaming, how local broadcasters are dealing with it. We have a 2-part series, one of which I did with Mike Shields, which is on the FAST ecosystem and how that works with advertising. And that's all free thanks to our sponsors. So you can just get that off the website, which is tvrev.com.
So what's going on in the TV business? It's quiet, right?
Yeah, very quiet. Nothing's been happening. Just really nothing.
But what are the hottest topics? What are keeping your subscribers interested?
I mean, the biggest thing right now is obviously the strike, and the impact that that's going to have on everything. And it's actually 2 strikes at this point. You've got the actors strike, SAG-AFTRA, and you've got the WGA, the writers strike, and that shut down production. And that's there's a lot of worries about so many things about how they're not going to have enough content going forward, about, is that going to really kill off linear? Is it going to kill off streaming? And where does AI fit into all this too? Because there's all these fears about AI writing scripts. There's been something going around now that they wrote a script for Seinfeld and for South Park, and oh my God, it's going to take everything over. So everything's going to crap. And then on the ad side, there's still all sorts of worries about how are we going to measure all this? What do we do with all the data and all that good stuff? So
let's take this one at a time. So on the strike, you said maybe it'll kill linear. How does that play out?
So already, Disney, ABC, Bob Iger has been making noise about selling off regular ABC, the ABC television network.
Right.
And if that happens, there's all these affiliates, and what happens to us, and what happens to their O&Os and all that, their owned and operated stations or the O&O, and how does that all play out? So on a very macro level, the big problem with TV as it moves to streaming is something called carriage and retrans fees, or the lack thereof. So what are carriage and retrans fees? They are the money that the MVPDs, what normal people call cable companies, pay to the cable networks, which is carriage fees, and to the broadcast networks, which is called retrans fees. And that's been going on since 1992. And that is literally $10 billion and up of money that basically consumers pay, because the MVPDs just pass those charges on to their customers But that's $10 billion a year that goes in. And it's created this almost sort of lottery winner type, atmosphere at the various networks where it's, salaries have gone way up. You want to spend $10 million to make an episode of Game of Thrones? Great, go. And, serve caviar. It's really sort of thrown the whole thing out of whack. And what happens is, as you move to streaming, there's nobody to pay those fees, right? You can't, who is Netflix going to charge? Roku? And so without that money, it becomes a less profitable business. Now, no, I did not say unprofitable, because in every other country in the world, you have a television industry that manages to survive and thrive without carriage and retrans fees. It's just there's not the money coming in that they're used to. So an easy example of how that plays out is what happened with Warner Brothers Discovery and CNN Plus, where the new management came in there and said, yeah, you know what, like, not a bad idea, but we make a lot of money from CNN off of carriage fees. All the MVPDs believe that sports and news are sort of the two things that are keeping people subscribing. We want to keep milking that as long as possible. So we're not going to do a streaming CNN right yet. Maybe 5 years, 10 years down the road, we'll do something like that. But right now, we need to keep this money coming in. And that's sort of the heart of what's going on with the writers and the actors, because they see, streaming has come in, it's sort of disrupted everything, but they're not making as much money as they used to. So they used to work, you had these 25 episode seasons, right? And that's about as close as you could get to a full-time job in Hollywood. You worked, from September to June, you had the summer off. Now it's like, well, it's 8 episodes here, 8 episodes there. It becomes very much like gig work. And if you ask the networks, they're like, well, there's just too many writers, there's too many actors. We need to sort of shrink so we can pay everybody. And that's really kind of the crux of what's going down there now.
Quick clarification. So retrans fees still exist with AVOD. Like if you're your YouTube TV is paying retrans fees.
Yes, but it's funny. I was just writing about this today. YouTube TV. So YouTube TV is actually, there's a strong argument that YouTube TV and Hulu Live TV are just basically MVPDs with a different delivery system, right? They're not the equivalent of Netflix. And when they started up, they needed the local broadcasters and realized, oh my God, we're going to have to cut individual deals with, all 1,000 of them. So what happened was the networks stepped in and said, we'll cut the deals for you with all of our affiliates, and everybody will be on board. And now that they constitute about a third of the pay TV universe, just this week, a bunch of the local TV groups, some, Sinclair and, Nexstar and all those guys, Tegna, came together and they're like, we want to negotiate individually. We want to because we're pretty valuable to these guys. They've got millions of subscribers. We want to get our money in. And they're calling it something about local news initiative, but it's really about getting their retrans fees.
Let's say the strikes go on for some time. Let's say it's an all summer thing, goes into the fall,
right?
Or even longer. What are the short and long-term impacts?
So short term is that there's not a lot of new shows, for next year. So for the
us in 24.
No, for 23 even, because they've already started. They run a pretty tight production schedule, so they would have
23.
Right. So fall 23, we don't see a lot of new network TV shows. The streaming, it'll hit some of them more than others. So Netflix, funny enough, is in a very good position because Netflix is in every country in the world except for China, North Korea, and Syria. So they've got all this, and they have found that a lot of foreign series resonate. I mean, things like there's Israeli series called Shtisel, Squid Games, this is South Korea, Call Your Agent from France. They've done well with it. So they can just go, give us, everybody outside the U.S., give us your shows. Now we'll run them here. And we've learned now that AI can do a really good job dubbing stuff for people who don't want to read subtitles. And so you got that. The broadcast networks, the CBS, NBC, ABC, they're not going to have a lot because they run really, like I said, they run a really tight, close to when the show is being released, is being filmed and written. So they're going to have to do a lot of, reality shows and reruns and things like that. And that was why people are wondering, is that just going to, kill off linear or increase the speed in which people just sort of cut the cord? So there's nothing new on here. why am I doing this? And I can watch streaming, and there's a whole lot of stuff on streaming I haven't seen yet. Streaming is a glut of content. So yeah, think about, I know for myself, there's probably a half dozen series I've meant to watch, we just haven't had time. And so I think, it's got, streaming has a couple of months, has a good 6-month period where people can sort of like catch up on stuff that they haven't seen.
Do you think that what you said there in terms of this could accelerate cord cutting, do you think that will happen?
Yes, I do. I do. I think we're at a point now where people, especially if there's nothing new on primetime. And the other thing that's happening is all of the sports networks, the regional sports networks, the ones that show all the Boston Celtics games, all the Lakers games, are launching their own streaming apps. And that was something that kept people, tied to cable for a long time. So I think we're going to start seeing it accelerate. And accelerating is still a small, like, in other words, it's a very slow process. So many people thought it was going to be sort of the way the music industry got disrupted, or magazines and newspapers. And, they lose, like, it sounds like a big number because we've had so many people subscribe to cable in the US. But, if somebody loses 1 million subscribers, that's like 0.5% or something, a little bit more than that. But it's still 5%. But eventually you hit a tipping point, and then it's, we think the floor is somewhere between 30 and 40% of the population that you pretty much will have to pry the remote out of their hands in order to get them to cut the cord.
It's one topic I always like to think about it when we talk about retrans. Because the cable networks are often conglomerates, as a result, it's very difficult for consumers to choose which channels to pay for. Like, probably everyone listening to this podcast in some way pays for Fox News, even though we find it morally reprehensible. So there's been talk about Congress allowing an a la carte mandate. Is that just dead in the water? Is that ever going to happen, or are we doomed forever to these bundles?
I think we're due to the bundles as long as it lasts. I think that that's something that's going to start going away. They'll hold on to it as long as they can, but there's sort of a sense that, okay, this is just fading out. I mean, again, when Iger starts talking about selling off ABC, the network, then it's just like, yeah, everybody's kind of over that. Like, we're on to the next thing. So it's just, it's sort of it'll sort of be a slow demise. A lot of the smaller cable networks will start to shut down and won't be profitable. When the new carriage negotiations come up again, just like, yeah, nobody watches this. We don't need to take it. And at some point, it's like, who needs who more?
Another aspect of this is sports. So the traditional cable bundle and on the broadcast bundle is very dependent on sports viewership. And increasingly, the tech companies are starting to buy some of the rights. Is there a scenario where that accelerates and sports becomes a lot more on demand and a lot less bundled?
I think so. I mean, I think you also have you'll have a hybrid for a while, because the companies that really own it are, whether it's CBS, NBC, they'll run it on both. They'll be like, okay, we'll run it on broadcast so that Congress gets off our back. And, because if it's on streaming, somebody has to pay for it. Then do you remember, like, there was like 2 Yankees games on the Apple TV, and like the governor of New York got all upset about it. It turned out she was wrong, that it was free, but like, nonetheless, I think just for optics, they'll do it on both, and sort of gradually migrate people over.
Yeah, I tried to watch the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest on the ESPN app and was disappointed that I needed a cable subscription. But I wanted to talk specifically about ESPN. Do you know, was when Iger was speculating about selling off TV, was he including ESPN in that conversation?
I think it was a very, like, let me just throw this stuff out there and see what happens conversation. ESPN is a tough one because it's very popular. So ESPN attracts, and this is, there's a lot of gray area in between. ESPN attracts people who are casual sports fans or fans of a particular sport. Like, I like basketball, and I'll watch any basketball games, provided it's a good matchup, versus I subscribe to New England Sports Network because I'm a Celtics fan, and the only games I want to see are Celtics games. And obviously, there's a lot of overlap between the two, but ESPN, don't have that sort of diehard mentality that a lot of that the sort of regional sports networks do. Plus, there's a lot of other ways to get sports news and watch sports now. I mean, that's the other piece, is that do people always have the time? That said, I think it's a really valuable property. And the question is, do you move that to streaming? Does that become the third leg of whatever Disney has on offer? And I'll tell you why sports are really important, which is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. There's a whole lot of people, and I will include myself in this, who have the ad-free option of every streaming service. And I have an ad blocker on my browser. And you don't get to advertise to me unless I'm watching sports. And, I see a lot of beer commercials and car commercials, but not a whole lot else. But I think that's going to make sports really valuable because they realize there is this, I guess, sizable enough. I've been trying to find a study on it, but I would assume it's sizable enough group of consumers who rarely do see, affluent, educated consumers who rarely see ads. And if you want to reach them, sports is going to be a great way. I mean, you look at it like Apple and Amazon don't run ads except on sports. And,
Don't use an ad blocker, kids. That puts my kids through college. But ESPN is the worst case scenario, right? Because they have incredibly high retrans fees. They're the highest retrans fees out there. It's like $7-8 or something per.
Yeah, it's carriage fees because they're carriage fees because they're
And they have very high costs because they have to buy sports rights.
Yeah, so I'm sure that's part of Iger's, math is like we're going to lose all of this money that we get from retrans fees if we move it over to cable. We move it over to streaming, excuse me. But at the same time, like that audience on cable is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So when do we make the move so that we're well positioned? There's an argument that like whenever you do it, there's still it's ESPN. It's sort of like CNN. The audience is going to be there. It's not like it's a new product and that they won't go with you. So, but it really depends. Again, it boils down to like without carriage and retrans, it's profitable, just not as wildly profitable as it once was.
Right. All right. Let's talk advertising. Let's talk measurement first. What's a JIC and what's going on with the JIC?
Well, a JIC is very popular in Europe. There's all sorts of JICs throughout the European continent. It means Joint Industry Council. And basically what it is, David Levy and the team from OpenAP started up, basically looked and said, gosh, like, this is still a mess. Like nobody can agree on anything. Why don't we get all the big players who aren't Nielsen together and try and figure out some standards on everything, like on data, on, what counts as a view, on measurement, on ID, on privacy, on how to do persons-based viewing, which is a huge, huge issue. And, and they all seem to be cooperating, at least for now, because that's the thing. You hear from a lot of advertisers that, hey, I'd love to spend more money on streaming. One of the two things that holds me back is that, like, I have no idea how to do an apples-to-apples comparison from one source to the next.
Right. But a JIC is different because we think a lot of our listeners are probably very familiar with the IAB and its standard-setting missions. A JIC is different. A JIC can actually decide and contract. Right. Or I'm not sure if they could contract, but in European countries, the JIC will decide who is going to be used for measurement in the entire country. And pretty much all the advertisers and publishers agree with it. And it becomes sort of a de facto monopoly for the period of the contract. And the advantage being standardization as well as cost control. Whereas in the US, Nielsen has a natural monopoly because they're just so big. And they are generally thought of as being too expensive and unaccountable.
Yeah. The thing is with the current JIC is that, all of the potential, measurement companies are all part of it. So they're not going to just go like, okay, we all agree to let iSpot be the guys. Like, that's not going to happen. So it's going to be some combination of everybody who belongs to it and there's just so much to figure out. And then you also have the other piece, which is like, as the amount of linear viewing fades, even when you have, FAST and other things that are linear on streaming, they're much more easily measured than, sort of cable or over the air.
But what do you think the output of this JIC will be? Because the US JIC has been very political. Everyone has comments and people are refusing or doubling down on it. What's going to be the output?
I think they'll come up with a set of basic standards of like, how you handle, identity resolution, the whole clean room thing, ways to sort of like, so in other words, they'll take who are the members and they'll say, okay, it's cool to use these guys. Like we're going to sort of say, okay, these, I didn't count, I think probably 5 companies are like, they have our seal of approval if you want to use some combination of them for measurement. this is how we're going to handle some of the other, a lot of the other stuff like privacy and whatnot. But, I think that's about it because Nielsen is still out there. And like just this today, I think it was this morning, I saw something, they struck a deal with Comcast to expand. Nielsen had that deal with Comcast where they were measuring local broadcasts because there just weren't enough people in smaller markets. There weren't enough people signed up for Nielsen. So that if I changed the channel, like it's in the ratings flying, 10 points in any direction. So they started getting Comcast set-top box data. And they basically expanded that deal some where they're using more Comcast set-top box data. So they're not, they're still there.
Well, if you pay enough, Comcast will provide you the data.
Yes. Yeah.
So, okay, advertising. So as consumers are moving from linear to digital, my understanding is that it's caused a lot of problems for the advertising sales of these giant cable companies, and both cable companies and broadcasters, and that they're sometimes having to, forecast half and half, deliver on audience and deliver on ratings, and the tech isn't always up for it. What are you seeing in this world of advertising sales?
So the big thing, which sort of again doesn't get talked about a whole lot, is that a lot of the very biggest advertisers, and I don't know, I'm going to say Pepsi's and AT&T's, and I haven't talked to either company, but just companies of that size, right? Their attitude is our audience is everybody with a mouth, everybody with an ear. Like, we don't really care about targeting so much. And you all are coming to us and going, yeah, we can target your consumers. Like, no, we use TV as a image building reach vehicle. We pretty much want everybody. And when we pay, $5 million for, this 60-second commercial, we want it running against original programming. Right now, most of what's available on streaming is reruns, right? It's other than Hulu, which has a sizable audience and has originals, all the faster, for the most part, are just doing reruns. Their network reruns is premium, but it's still a rerun. And so they're keeping their money on prime time for now. Because they realize, okay, like I get to run it against an original episode of Abbott Elementary. I understand this. It's easy to measure. Blah blah blah. Now, at some point in the next 2 years to 10 years, it's hard to know. But Netflix, HBO, Disney, their ad-supported tiers will have a critical mass, and you'll be able to run against original programs on that. And that's the point where I think a lot of these guys are going to go, oh, I get it now. That's the new prime time, faster than new cable. Here's all my money. Take it. But until then, it's going to be this hybrid thing. And it is really tricky, to your point, your original point, because they do have to guarantee a lot of the networks are putting in, well, here's our YouTube inventory and here's our streaming inventory. Local broadcasters, there's a whole ecosystem where they partner with the different FAST and with Hulu and whatnot to sort of, give extended reach. Like, you're missing a lot of people in the Charlotte area. We can find them. You have companies like Premion and Gamut finding them on, here they are on streaming for you. So you can use that to expand your reach.
That's what,
yeah.
I mean, just to interrupt for one second, that's what MadHive's business was, and they raised that blockbuster $100 million.
Yeah, MadHive, and full disclosure, MadHive is we work with MadHive a lot at TVREV. But yeah, they are sort of they kind of help the Premions and Gamuts and all those guys find they can target even within zip codes. They can really they give them a leg up and and sort of provide the platform for all that. But yeah, there's a whole Cadent is in there too. There's a whole bunch of companies that sort of basically help local broadcasters extend their reach out, beyond just what they're doing. And and again, it's like, well, measurement is tricky because it's like some of it is is impressions, some of it is GRPs. There's not a lot. So the persons-based thing is also tough. So just for anyone who's not familiar with it, streaming is measured by something called ACR data, automated content recognition. Basically, it's sort of like Shazam for the TV. Take a couple of pixels from the television set, they match it against a database. There's a company called CCR Media in Cedar Rapids that basically is the database for almost everybody. And then they figure out what's being watched. But they only know what's being watched on that TV. They don't necessarily know who is in front of it. That's the persons-based thing, and that's always been Nielsen's thing. So there's a bunch of companies like TVision and Hyphametrics that are trying to get the people-based part of it. That's where a lot of people think Telly is up to.
Telly is the free TV company. Eric, you're an investor in Telly, right?
We're an investor in both Telly and TVision Insights. We're all over it.
You got it covered. The old TV, if for those of you who haven't been in TV, the technology, it's basically like the Dharma Initiative. Like basically everything's got cranks and CRT scanners and like weird towers in the middle of nowhere that you can't figure out what it does. But new technology is coming, but slowly.
Yes, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, nothing in this industry, if you take away anything from this podcast, nothing in television happens quickly. It's all really slow.
All right, let's take a quick break and come back and talk news. There's a bunch of TV-oriented news, so we've got more TV to talk about. Okay, so we talked about actually the two top news stories of the week, which was the strike and Disney potentially selling its TV stations. But let's also talk about Netflix. Netflix had its earnings out, I think, last night, Wednesday night, or Tuesday night, and they did very well. And one of the pieces of information that came out was that they're getting rid of the cheapest ad-free offering. So they have a $9.99 per month offering with no ads, and that got removed, implying that they would like to push people either up to a higher tier or down to a $6.99 ad tier. Is this a pretty bullish sign for Netflix? Eric, do you want to start there and go to Alan next?
I think it's a little early to tell, right? So to be clear, they kept the cheapest tier. So the cheapest tier is $6.99 with ads. They got rid of the cheapest ad-free tier. The CFO made a statement that, they modeled it out and believed that, a minimal subscriber fee plus ads end up being a higher yield than $9.99. It's so early. Like the other comment that he made in the earnings call is that they expect a gradual advertising revenue build and that's not expected to be a big contributor this year. And the ad-supported plan has 1.5 million subscribers. So overall, this is small. This, I think, gives, Naylor and team a bit of, sort of like headroom and latitude to start figuring this stuff out. But one could expect they've got the various drivers to step on the gas and make this really big once they feel like they understand how this will affect all the different tiers. So I think it's bullish that they're doing just the elimination of that one tier. I think is pretty bullish. It's just like baby steps.
Yeah, they have a lot of time to figure it out because they're getting $65 CPM from the Microsoft deal. A lot of time to figure it out. Alan, what's your take on Netflix and their?
Well, I mean, 1.5 million isn't a whole lot of people, though. That's the thing.
No.
So the biggest thing with Netflix is there's a whole lot of things that they didn't say during that call. So first off, and I'll give Evan Shapiro credit for this. He did the math on it. They missed their projected revenue by 21%. Like it was a small number. It's 0.7% was the actual difference, but it's 21% of where they thought they would be. So that's the thing. But they didn't say, well, what percentage of people who we think are password sharing did we actually ask to sort of push over? And then what percentage of the people we asked actually did it? And obviously, clearly the eliminating the lowest price tier was a way to push people to get the ad-supported tier. The highest one, because a lot of people had previously done the math and said, well, I'll just move down. If you pull my kids off of my $16 a month account, I don't need 2 streams. I don't need more than 1 stream at a time. So I'll just go down to the $9.99 plan and we're pretty good. So I think that was part of why they took it away. But there was also something in there where they were kind of squishy about how or if they were enforcing it. It was kind of like, yeah, we'll go back to them and ask them again. So it was unclear how many people that they sort of dinged and said, you're sharing accounts, just said, yes, so what? So there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be answered about where they are. They did have some, there was some other good news that Muffet Nathanson came out with something that said, Netflix had far more time, basically they call it engagement. It's basically minutes streamed than anyone else by a lot, but at the same time, they also have way more subscribers than anyone else. So, where does that come out? They're in a weird place. They haven't had a real big hit in the last year or so. Possibly the new season of Black Mirror really didn't make the waves. HBO has been sort of dominating that piece, as we saw at the Emmys this year. But at the same time, there's an article in New York Magazine a couple months ago, which was quoting some agent as saying, I think it was New York Magazine. Anyway, somebody saying that, Netflix needed to stop making, quote, snobby shows that no one watches.
Yeah, that was great.
And then there was another quote from a writer that was in the New York Magazine where he said, there's nothing wrong with 2.5 Men, but my writers all want to write Barry. And you know who watches Barry? No one. That was the quote. Like,
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of, like, in the streaming services trying to figure out, like, how do we go to mass market now? How do we go from being HBO to being a mass market company and hitting all those people who don't get why Barry is funny, who don't want to watch, snobby shows with, like sort of, that sort of HBO-like fare. And there's not a huge market for it. Like,
well, don't some folks say that the last writer strike, was the birth of reality TV?
They do. Yes.
Right. And I just saw, now we're talking topical. I just saw Bethany Frankel, the reality TV woman. I don't know how else to describe her. She came out today and said that reality TV people should get on strike too. They should form a union and get on strike, which is a little strange. I'd like to see their union meetings, which would be a good show, actually. Getting the reality TV people to form a union would be a great show.
There you go. I would pitch that. I would
totally pitch that. We need a name. So
I think you have a window to get these ideas through with the strike.
Exactly. Right. Okay. So the other thing, one more point on Netflix I'd like to make, which is we talk about 1.5 million subscribers, but Netflix is doing something different than every other TV business in history, which is they're a global business. TV is inherently a local business, not local by city, but local by country. You don't have advertisers run in France and Germany or broadcasters in France and Germany. They may be owned ultimately by the same conglomerate, but they're separate. And so 1.5 million might be, 500,000 in the U.S., a little Canada, a little Korea, et cetera. It kind of is a additional difficulty and an additional upside if they get it right.
Yeah, very much. Very much.
Okay, let's talk about the ongoing fallout from the Google video debacle. So not much news here, except that IAS and Double Verify sort of came half-heartedly to Google's defense and said that everything's okay, don't look here. We verified it. More or less. I'm really kind of cutting corners on this whole story.
No, that's basically it.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you, are you following this? Is this part of TV? Do people consider this a TV issue or a digital issue?
It's more of a digital issue, but what's interesting is that there's been a whole debate over whether YouTube is TV or not, right? So Google, it's a Google. Nielsen in there, the gauged measure, has YouTube in there. And for a while, they were counting YouTube TV as part of the YouTube numbers. And everyone thought, okay, well, when they take out YouTube TV, that YouTube streaming numbers are going to fall. Because really was what was being watched in an actual TV set, not what people were watching on their phones as well. And they took it out. It's still beating Netflix. And now it's like, okay, wow, a lot of people are watching YouTube on their television set. Do we start calling this TV? And it's a really tricky issue because, like, YouTube is everything, right? YouTube has movies. YouTube has, that, like, you can rent. YouTube has its own fast service, a fairly robust fast service that being Google, they do nothing to publicize. You can't even find it on your phone. So with all that going on, and then you also have, and obviously you have the cat videos and the how-to videos, but like somewhere there's like, where's the line? And that's been a big question. Where do you draw the line between TV and digital video? And YouTube's been making a big argument like, no, we're TV. People watch it on a TV set, we're TV. And then this thing happens and it's like, yeah, go away. I guess
it gives the TV people a little fodder to to cast aspersions to YouTube TV. But watching YouTube on TV, and we've talked about this previously, I think, on the pod, it's great. Like throwing up your just like favorite YouTube channel on on the big screen, 4K. It's like awesome.
Alan, this is a question that's bothered me for a while. Why is it that the same content on YouTube versus a streaming app, let's say NBC it has a YouTube channel and they're publishing full episodes there, why do they get such lower CPMs on YouTube?
Just because I think, well, because you can skip the ads. I mean, that's a big part of it. And also because so that's a whole other ball of wax. So the ad agencies, despite claiming that they are video agnostic, tend to have TV teams and programmatic teams. And they kind of don't really talk to each other or always speak the same language. I mean, there's a couple of people at the agencies who bridge it, but for the most part, they don't each get their other, what the other is up to. And YouTube, depending on the brand of the agency, often gets shunted off into that digital video, into the social video thing. So it's like, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter videos, whatever, Instagram videos. So it sort of gets that kind of treatment as opposed to TV and sight, sound, and motion. I mean, Google's been making that argument. That's what I was talking about. Like, no, you need to give us higher CPMs because people actually watch this on the TV. Because there's a whole thing, sight, sound, and motion, emotional impact, blah, blah, blah. So,
right. I've always suspected that the pipes don't work as well either. Having, an ad tech background and having worked at Freewheel, it's pretty hard to serve your ads on YouTube in a efficient way, especially if they're programmatically bought. So let's talk about our favorite topic. The topic we have two favorite topics on this podcast. One is a certain social media network we won't mention. The other one is the Trade Desk and their march towards inevitable greatness. The Trade Desk is getting adopted into the NASDAQ 100. I don't know if it's a formal adoption or if you're just one of the top 100 companies, you just get there, which is incredible. Their market cap hit, I think, $45 billion this week. And the question everyone always has is, like, how do you justify that valuation? And is it all based on this assumption that they're going to be as dominant in the future of TV as they have been in programmatic display? Alan, what's your thought on their attempt to sort of wrangle TV?
I mean, it's interesting. They tend to have a very hands-off approach to the rest of the industry, right? Which is almost sort of the way other companies have done this. Apple gets accused of that a lot. Like if you go to any sort of trade show or ad tech kind of thing, they're not there. Like they don't nobody I know. Like people occasionally know somebody here or there at the Trade Desk, but it's not like this sort of social club the way all the other companies have, and everybody knows each other and watches each other's back. At the same time, they've been really smart about how they position themselves and how they play it and their march forward. And, and there is a tendency in the industry to kind of want to just go like, okay, nobody's going to fire me if I use that. Well, at the same time, like, how much does their sort of not playing nicely with others factor in? I don't know. It's, because I think that nothing's been, so here's the other part, Ari, which is big. Like, everything is still all up in the air. Like contextual advertising is making a huge comeback right now. When I talk to people, companies like Iris TV and even Curve and, who are doing their, is that another investment?
We're both investors in Iris.
Yeah, I love Field. We've been friends for a long time. And another TVREV client. So to be fair about it. But what's happening is brands, are saying like, okay, if like, privacy is just this wet hot mess. They're going to come after me now with IP addresses. If I target a football game, I'm probably going to hit the same audience that I would if I said, sports fans, 35 to 15 or whatever. So why don't I just start doing that? And also then you get into even the deeper piece, which is like, I have a funny ad. When I do it programmatically, I don't have a guarantee that it's not going to run against the funeral scene. So this way I can use context with some targeting as well, but that's, so does that sort of throw the Trade Desk off? I don't know, but that's coming up strong now. And the whole notion that you can identify what's on it and the sort of sight, sound, and motion.
I'm trying to read into what you just said, which is that the Trade Desk is very focused on bringing identity to TV. And you think if identity doesn't come to TV, that they're not going to be as strong at it.
That's correct.
So what do you think of their effort to get identity? We listened to the Trade Desk's big announcements about 2 months ago, and one of the things they said was they expect 50% of all CTV impressions to have UID2 within a year.
I mean, I go back to the truth set guys, right? Like they've gone through a lot of these things and like, yeah, they're based on outdated data. It's not, a lot of it is off. And then there's privacy issues. So it's funny with TV. if you ask people, and we've done this, they're like, well, Google knows everything I do, right? They know, my finances, my porn habits, everything. So why would I care if LG knows that I watch Monday Night Football, and the Tonight Show? Like, not a big deal. But at the same time, once people start drilling into it, it's like, oh, well, they actually can track where like you saw this ad, and then you went, your credit card and stuff. Then it's like, whoa, like this could be kind of creepy. And so it gets tricky. And that's, again, why we're thinking, because contextual, one of the conclusions of our fast advertising report was that contextual cures a world of hurt on streaming, right?
Right.
That a lot of the problems that people have go away when you go there. Everything,
but one
lack
thing
of
it's
transparency on out.
I not to disparage Iris by any means, but like we've been buying video ads programmatically for 15 years now, and there's still virtually no contextual data on those bid requests. So what?
Yeah, I mean, that's messed up. But
Eric, any thoughts on the Trade Desk contextual TV or anything we've been talking about?
Two things. So amazing to have an ad tech company in the NASDAQ 100. Hopefully it's just the first ad exchanger. And I'm pretty sure this is James Hercher because he's just like a wizard at this stuff. Noted that they got there through Activision being removed because the Microsoft acquisition was approved. And this is, sort of yet another example roundabout of Microsoft providing a little bit of tailwind to Jeff Green because they bought his first company at ECN. So ad tech history for you there. I think that, I've been thinking about last week's episode with Dave Clark and how he just kept talking about with CTV. It is such a supplier-driven and supply-side controlled market. So, I'm like, super bullish and enthusiastic on Trade Desk, but as it relates to CTV, I do think there are some differences that they're going to need to address to ultimately have the domination that, folks are expecting and betting given the valuation.
Yeah, Dave made a good point about that. So one last point, I was talking about this fact. I was out for drinks with some former DoubleClick executives, back in the day, DoubleClick executives, very senior people who ran the company. And the question came up was like, could DoubleClick have been a $45 billion company, if things had turned out differently? And my answer to that was, we used to charge 1 or 2 cents for ad serving, and there was a transition where suddenly you could make 10 to 20% of the media dollars on those same impressions. Yeah, you do the math, and if you're DoubleClick and you're absolutely dominant on the publisher and the advertiser side, and you start getting 10% of media on every one of those transactions, 45 billion seems very feasible given how programmatic grew. Last topic before we go, Google Genesis. So Google has been showing a product to publishers, to journalist entities that can write articles. And I assume from the reaction, which has generally been a freak out, that it writes the articles really well, like better than ChatGPT, really well, would be my guess. So it's kind of audacious of them to show this to journalists. I mean, what were they expecting to the reaction to be? Eric, what do you know about this topic?
I know, so it's a topic that I've been following. There's a couple of companies that are working on things like this. One of the things that if you're a journalist, you may be concerned about, or you may find, to be sort of like massively helpful for your job, is the speed at which these things can not only confirm facts, depending on obviously the data set that they're being trained on, but write a full article and then be potentially trained on the style guides, the tone, the voice of a given publisher. Like you are, I think, very close to articles being written by AI in the tone of the New York Times versus the tone of the Washington Post. I'm sure Google has that capability and was showing it in these demos that allegedly were happening. I think at minimum, this is going to be, it's pitched as like sort of a helpmate. I think any journalist has to take advantage of this stuff. Like if you've played around with these tools, they're so helpful and they just, take so much heavy lifting out of a given role. And I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that we start to see full AI pieces being posted that can be posted by AI, right? Not necessarily hard hitting, deeply reported news, but this thing is coming really, really fast. Everybody should read this article. It was in the New York Times.
Absolutely. So what's it called? Google Genesis. Alan, when will the first fully AI written TV episode air?
Probably not too far away. So the thing with TV is it will be able to do two things fairly quickly. One is going to be able to write the scripts for things like House Hunters, where like it's just, paint by numbers. It's like, okay, now we're in the house and this house has 3 bedrooms. And somebody, I think it might have been Rich Greenfield, did sort of a quick little, personal study of how much original, film there was on a half-hour episode of House Hunters. And it's like at 9 minutes, because it's like, here's what we're going to see before, when we come back from the commercial. Now here's what we just saw.
Yeah.
And it becomes even more profitable.
Yes.
Think about it.
Yeah.
It becomes even more profitable. You are already seeing AI scripts. Think about all of the budgets that go to TikTok and YouTube and just all of these transcript type of videos that you might watch. Like all that stuff is AI. It's already happening, and ads are being run against it. It's like it's already a thing.
Yeah, and then you also have things, sort of the very kind of like Hallmark Christmas movies or things like that, where one might not write the whole movie, but it can do treatments, because it's just sort of a very easy genre thing, and it can do that. Yeah, you're right, Eric, because there's all, think of all those sort of web pages that show up really high in Google that were clearly written by somebody whose first language is not English, and like, AI is just going to do a better job of that. And a lot of those have videos. And there's, how many things have you seen of like how to make an AI video for Instagram from your ideas? And, it's getting there.
Okay, last question. Alan, Barbie or Oppenheimer?
That's a tough one because I want Oppenheimer. But when my daughter was 4, we watched every other Barbie movie. There's a whole series of them for every, like about 100 times each. Barbie and the 12 Dancing Princesses or whatever. So may just be fun to see them, but I probably would go for Oppenheimer first.
Eric, Barbie or Oppenheimer?
I haven't been paying much attention to either of them, so I'd like to watch both of them. I'm sure they're both great.
I'm big on the Oppenheimer side, but we're talking about art that can't be done by AI. Oppenheimer has no CGI at all.
Oh, good for them.
The largest explosion in Hollywood history. All right. On that topic, let's call it. Alan, thank you. This has been a great conversation for the TV episode.
Yeah, learn a ton. Thank you, Alan.
Yes, thank you guys both. Take care now.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.